most people move through life chained by invisible rules they never consciously agreed to follow. From childhood, ideas about good and evil, guilt and virtue, obedience and rebellion are quietly absorbed from family, schools, and society. Over time, these inherited beliefs begin to feel like unquestionable truths rather than learned frameworks. Yet beneath this surface of moral certainty, many individuals experience a private tension, a sense that natural desires, personal ambitions, and emotional impulses are constantly being judged, suppressed, or labeled as wrong. A philosophy emerges from this tension that challenges the automatic acceptance of moral systems and instead asks a provocative question: what if human instincts are not flaws to be corrected, but forces to be understood and directed? At its core, this way of thinking begins with radical self-honesty. Human beings are not portrayed as fallen creatures seeking redemption, but as complex animals driven by needs, emotions, appetites, and ambitions. Hunger, lust, pride, envy, anger, and desire are not treated as spiritual defects but as natural expressions of life itself. Denying these impulses does not erase them, it merely buries them under layers of guilt and self-deception. When suppressed long enough, they often resurface in unhealthy or destructive ways. Recognizing this pattern leads to a different approach. Instead of pretending to be morally pure, one learns to accept personal nature without shame. This perspective does not encourage chaos or mindless indulgence. Rather, it promotes conscious indulgence, the deliberate enjoyment of life's pleasures without apology, while maintaining responsibility for consequences. Pleasure is not viewed as something that must be earned through suffering or sacrifice. It is seen as part of the human experience, something that adds richness and vitality to existence. Food should be savored, not treated as a sin. Sexuality should be expressed honestly, not wrapped in hypocrisy. Ambition should be pursued boldly, not disguised as false humility. By removing moral panic from natural urges, a person can make clearer, more rational choices. A strong emphasis is placed on individual sovereignty. Every person stands at the center of their own existence, responsible for shaping their life according to personal values rather than external approval. Dependence on invisible authorities or spiritual overseers is replaced by self-reliance and critical thinking. Decisions are not measured by ancient commandments but by practical outcomes. Does an action strengthen or weaken one's position in life? Does it bring fulfillment, stability, and growth, or does it create unnecessary harm and limitation? This pragmatic lens encourages people to evaluate behavior based on tangible effects rather than abstract moral labels. Another powerful idea involves the rejection of compulsory self-sacrifice. Many belief systems glorify suffering for others, praising unconditional compassion even when it leads to exploitation. In contrast, this philosophy questions whether endless self-denial truly benefits anyone. When individuals constantly suppress their own needs to satisfy others, resentment quietly builds. Relationships become imbalanced, driven by obligation rather than genuine care. Instead of promoting blind altruism, a more selective approach is encouraged. Kindness should be given where it is valued and reciprocated, not wasted on those who manipulate generosity. Respect becomes something earned through mutual recognition, not automatically granted. The emotional world is also reframed in a striking way. Feelings like anger and vengeance are typically condemned as destructive forces that must be restrained. However, suppressing anger often intensifies it internally, creating psychological pressure that erodes mental well-being. When acknowledged honestly, anger can serve as a signal that personal boundaries have been violated. Rather than denying its existence, one can channel it productively, using it as motivation to correct injustices or protect self-respect. Emotional authenticity replaces forced serenity. The goal is not to appear virtuous but to understand and manage inner forces intelligently. Symbolism plays an important psychological role in reinforcing these ideas. Symbols that traditionally evoke fear or taboo are reinterpreted as representations of independence, defiance against hypocrisy, and pride in one's earthly existence. Instead of seeing darkness as evil, it becomes a metaphor for the unexplored parts of the human psyche, instincts, desires, and emotions that society often hides. By confronting these shadows directly, individuals gain deeper intelligence, creativity, and ambition lead to different outcomes. Pretending that everyone possesses identical potential can create unrealistic expectations and social frustration. Recognizing natural differences allows individuals to focus on developing their unique strengths rather than conforming to artificial standards. Personal excellence becomes more meaningful than collective approval. Ultimately, the philosophy centers on embracing life as it is rather than longing for an idealized afterlife. The present world is not seen as a temporary test but as the primary arena for experience, achievement, pleasure, and meaning. Time and energy are therefore directed toward tangible goals, relationships, and personal satisfaction instead of spiritual fantasies. Life becomes something to explore fully, not endure passively. Yet once a person begins to remove inherited moral filters and examine existence through this unapologetic lens, deeper questions naturally arise about power, ritual, and the psychological mechanisms that shape belief itself, areas that reveal even more surprising dimensions of this provocative philosophy. Once a person begins questioning inherited moral structures and embracing a more self-directed way of living, attention naturally shifts toward the unseen forces that influence human behavior. Much of what people believe, fear, and desire operates beneath conscious awareness. Rituals, symbols, and dramatic experiences have long been used across cultures not merely for spiritual reasons, but because they affect the human mind in powerful psychological ways. When examined through a practical lens, ceremonial acts are not supernatural performances but structured methods for focusing emotion, intention, and mental energy toward a specific goal. Human beings are deeply responsive to theater and symbolism. A courtroom's authority comes partly from ritualized procedure. National flags stir emotion because they represent identity and shared meaning. Even personal habits, like celebrating birthdays or observing moments of silence, shape emotional states through symbolic action. When ritual is stripped of mystical explanation, it becomes clear that carefully designed experiences can help individuals release tension, reinforce commitment, and mentally prepare for change. Intense emotion, when directed rather than suppressed, can sharpen focus and strengthen determination. Anger, desire, grief, and excitement all hold psychological energy. If these emotions remain bottled up, they often transform into anxiety or passive frustration. Structured expression acts as a form of emotional release, allowing individuals to confront feelings directly instead of denying them. In this sense, dramatic ceremony becomes a tool for catharsis. It provides a private stage where hidden thoughts can be acknowledged without social judgment. Rather than pretending to be calm or morally perfect, individuals permit themselves to feel deeply and then channel those feelings toward productive aims. Imagination also plays a central role in shaping human experience. The mind responds to vivid mental imagery almost as strongly as it does to physical events. Athletes mentally rehearse victories to improve performance. Public speakers visualize successful presentations to reduce fear. When intention is combined with sensory, rich visualization, confidence often increases and hesitation decreases. Symbolic environments can intensify this effect by helping the mind shift from ordinary routine into a heightened state of awareness. The setting signals that something meaningful is taking place, allowing attention to sharpen. This approach treats ritual as a psychological technology rather than a supernatural appeal. There is no expectation that unseen beings intervene in human affairs. Instead, the emphasis rests on influencing one's own subconscious processes. The mind contains layers of memory, instinct, and emotion that respond more readily to symbolic language than to dry logic. Ceremonial acts communicate with these deeper layers, helping align inner motivation with outward goals. When inner resistance weakens, action becomes more decisive. Another striking element involves the deliberate embrace of identity. Many people dilute their personalities to gain approval, hiding controversial opinions and unconventional interests. Over time, this creates an internal split between the public mask and the private self. Living behind a mask consumes mental energy and fosters quiet dissatisfaction. A philosophy centered on self-ownership encourages individuals to define themselves boldly and consistently. This does not mean reckless behavior, but rather refusing to apologize for harmless aspects of one's nature, personal style, preferences, and world instead of shaped by social pressure. Instead of chasing universal approval, energy is directed toward goals that genuinely matter. Relationships also become more honest, built on mutual respect rather than performance. By removing the constant need to appear virtuous or agreeable, individuals gain emotional freedom and mental clarity. Responsibility remains a key principle throughout this mindset. Actions carry consequences regardless of moral justification. Blaming fate, society, or unseen forces weakens personal agency. Recognizing oneself as the primary cause of success and failure encourages strategic thinking. Decisions are evaluated based on likely outcomes, not comforting beliefs. This realistic perspective discourages reckless risk while still supporting bold ambition. One becomes both the architect and the guardian of one's life. Power dynamics are viewed without romanticism. Cooperation can be beneficial, but blind trust invites exploitation. Awareness of human self-interest allows for smarter negotiation and clearer boundaries. Respect is earned through strength of character, competence, and consistency rather than demanded through moral claims. By understanding motivation, both personal and in others, individuals navigate social environments with sharper perception. Even concepts traditionally wrapped in mysticism are reframed as aspects of human psychology. Ideas of good and evil transform into discussions of benefit and harm, alignment and conflict. Rather than seeing existence as a cosmic battle between divine forces, life is interpreted as an interplay of natural drives, environmental pressures, and conscious choices. Meaning is constructed through experience, achievement, and relationships instead of dictated by external doctrine. As this worldview develops, the individual stands more firmly grounded in reality, guided by self-knowledge rather than inherited fear. Life becomes a field for exploration, mastery, and personal expression. Yet deeper layers remain to be examined, including how moral systems gain control over societies and how individuals can resist manipulation without losing their humanity. Control over human behavior rarely depends on force alone. The most effective systems of influence are those that convince people to regulate themselves. When individuals internalize rules so deeply that disobedience produces guilt, external enforcement becomes almost unnecessary. Throughout history, moral frameworks have often functioned as invisible governance structures, shaping thought patterns, desires, and fears in ways that maintain social order. Once a person recognizes this mechanism, it becomes easier to see how strongly behavior can be guided by narratives that were never consciously chosen. Guilt is one of the most powerful emotional tools in this process. It can be useful when it signals genuine wrongdoing that harms others, but it can also be manufactured to suppress harmless instincts. When natural desires are repeatedly framed as shameful, people begin to distrust themselves. They hesitate before acting, question their own motives, and look outward for permission. Over time, this erodes confidence and strengthens dependence on authority figures who claim to define what is acceptable. A person burdened by constant guilt becomes easier to manage, not because they lack intelligence, but because they fear their own impulses. Fear works in a similar way. Vague threats of punishment, social rejection, or spiritual consequences can shape behavior even without visible evidence. The human mind is highly responsive to uncertainty, often imagining consequences more severe than reality. This anticipation creates stress that encourages conformity. When fear and guilt operate together, they form a psychological cage that feels self-imposed. Individuals may believe they are choosing obedience freely, while in truth their decisions are heavily influenced by emotional conditioning. Breaking free from such patterns begins with careful observation of one's own reactions. Instead of automatically accepting feelings of shame or fear as proof of wrongdoing, a more analytical approach asks whether those emotions are justified by real harm or merely inherited beliefs. This shift from emotional reflex to conscious evaluation restores personal authority. A person learns to distinguish between actions that genuinely damage well-being and those that simply challenge tradition. As clarity grows, unnecessary guilt loses its grip. Independent thinking does not require rejecting every social norm. Cooperation and shared rules remain essential for any functioning society. However, blind obedience is replaced by selective agreement. Individuals choose principles that align with reason, mutual benefit. Another layer of control often appears through idealized virtue. People are encouraged to strive for moral perfection that no human can realistically achieve. Since failure is inevitable, individuals remain trapped in cycles of self-criticism and repentance. This perpetual striving keeps attention focused on personal shortcomings instead of structural problems or external limitations. By chasing an unattainable standard, many lose the opportunity to develop realistic strengths and meaningful accomplishments. A more grounded perspective accepts human imperfection as natural. Mistakes are seen as opportunities for adjustment rather than evidence of moral failure. Instead of apologizing for being human, individuals refine their judgment through experience. This approach encourages growth without self-hatred. Energy previously spent on shame becomes available for learning, improving skills, and building resilience. Social dynamics also shift when people stop pretending to embody impossible ideals. Interactions become more honest because individuals no longer hide behind exaggerated virtue. Trust grows from consistent behavior rather than moral posturing. Respect develops through demonstrated competence and reliability instead of symbolic gestures. In this environment, cooperation feels genuine rather than forced. Personal power strengthens through self-knowledge. Understanding one's motivations, limits, and ambitions allows for strategic decision-making. Rather than drifting according to external expectations, individuals design their own paths. Goals become clearer because they arise from authentic desire instead of social pressure. This clarity reduces internal conflict and increases persistence. At the same time, awareness of manipulation fosters sharper perception of external influences. Advertising, political rhetoric, and cultural narratives often appeal to emotion before reason. Recognizing these techniques allows individuals to pause, analyze intent, and make conscious choices. Instead of reacting automatically, they respond deliberately. This mental discipline protects autonomy while still allowing engagement with society. Living with this level of awareness creates a different relationship with the world. Life is no longer viewed as a moral obstacle course filled with invisible traps, but as a complex environment requiring intelligence, adaptability, and emotional balance. Pleasure can be enjoyed without shame, ambition pursued without apology, and boundaries defended without guilt. Responsibility remains central, yet it is grounded in cause and effect rather than fear of judgment. As this mindset matures, a deeper transformation begins to unfold, one that reshapes how a person relates not only to society, but also to ambition, success, and the pursuit of lasting fulfillment in a world driven by competition and desire. Ambition often carries a strange burden in many moral systems. People are taught to desire success, yet warned not to appear too driven. They are encouraged to achieve, but expected to remain modest about their abilities. This creates an internal conflict where the natural urge to rise, create, and lead becomes entangled with fear of judgment. Over time, individuals may shrink their aspirations to remain socially acceptable, convincing themselves that wanting more is selfish or excessive. But when ambition is constantly restrained, potential turns dormant, and life begins to feel smaller than it truly is. A more grounded perspective treats ambition as a natural extension of vitality. The desire to improve one's condition, expand influence, and accomplish meaningful goals is not seen as greed but as an expression of life's forward momentum. Every living organism strives to grow within its environment. In humans, this drive manifests as creativity, competition, innovation, and leadership. Suppressing it does not produce humility, it produces frustration and unrealized capacity. When ambition is acknowledged openly, it can be directed with intelligence rather than leaking out through envy or passive resentment. Competition, in this light, becomes neither cruel nor immoral, but inevitable. Resources, opportunities, and recognition are limited, and individuals naturally test their abilities against one another. Attempting to erase competition entirely ignores basic human dynamics. A healthier approach focuses on competing with skill and strategy rather than hostility. Strength is developed through discipline, preparation, and persistence. Victory becomes satisfying not because others lose, but because personal capability has been fully expressed. Even in defeat, valuable information is gained that sharpens future performance. This realistic understanding of competition encourages self-development. Confidence grows not from empty affirmation but from demonstrated ability. As competence strengthens, independence increases, reducing reliance on approval or external validation. Wealth and material success are also reframed through practical evaluation. Money is neither glorified as the ultimate goal nor condemned as corrupting. Instead, it is viewed as a tool that expands options and provides stability. Financial security reduces vulnerability to manipulation and allows greater freedom in decision-making. Comfort, aesthetics, and pleasurable experiences become accessible without apology. When pursued responsibly, material success enhances quality of life rather than diminishing character. Status operates in a similar way. Social recognition reflects perceived value within a group, whether through talent, leadership, or contribution. While chasing status blindly can lead to shallow behavior, rejecting it entirely ignores its influence on opportunity and communication. A balanced approach recognizes status as a form of social currency that can be earned through meaningful achievement. Respect gained through substance tends to endure longer than attention gained through performance alone. Relationships, too, benefit from a realistic foundation. Connections built on mutual interest and respect prove more stable than those formed through obligation or guilt. Individuals who understand their own needs and boundaries communicate more clearly, reducing misunderstanding. Generosity becomes genuine because it is chosen freely, not extracted through pressure. Loyalty grows stronger when it is based on shared values rather than forced sacrifice. Emotional resilience deepens as personal responsibility becomes habitual. Setbacks are interpreted as situational challenges rather than cosmic punishments. This mindset prevents despair from taking root during difficult periods. Instead of asking why misfortune occurs, individuals focus on adaptive responses. They analyze circumstances, adjust strategies, and continue forward movement. Patience develops alongside persistence, allowing long-term goals to remain steady despite temporary obstacles. Self-respect emerges as a central pillar of psychological strength. It is built through honoring commitments, maintaining boundaries, and acting in alignment with chosen principles. When individuals consistently uphold their standards, inner stability forms. External criticism loses power because personal worth no longer depends entirely on outside approval. Decisions become guided by internal clarity rather than shifting public opinion. Living with intention gradually transforms daily experience. Ordinary routines gain purpose when connected to larger goals. Time is valued as a finite resource rather than spent passively. Attention becomes more selective, directed toward pursuits that enrich life rather than drain energy. Pleasure is appreciated fully without being clouded by unnecessary guilt, while discipline ensures that enjoyment does not sabotage progress. This balanced integration of ambition, realism, and self-awareness creates a grounded sense of empowerment. Life is neither romanticized nor feared but approached as a field of opportunity shaped by intelligent effort. Yet beyond personal success lies another dimension, the challenge of influence, legacy, and the deeper psychological forces that determine how individuals shape the world around them. Influence begins long before a person attempts to lead others. It starts with presence, the subtle psychological impression created through confidence, clarity, and emotional control. People naturally respond to individuals who appear grounded in their identity and purposeful in their actions. This presence cannot be faked for long, because human perception is finely tuned to inconsistency. When words, tone, and behavior align, credibility forms. Others sense stability and become more receptive to ideas and direction. Influence, therefore, is less about domination and more about the quiet projection of self-assured competence. Communication plays a central role in this dynamic. Those who understand human motivation recognize that people are rarely persuaded by logic alone. Emotion, imagery, and timing often shape decisions more strongly than facts. Effective communicators learn to frame ideas in ways that resonate with existing desires and concerns. They listen carefully, observing unspoken signals, and adjust their approach accordingly. This awareness transforms conversation into a strategic exchange rather than a random flow of words. Persuasion becomes more ethical and effective when grounded in realism. Instead of manipulating through deception, influence grows from understanding mutual benefit. People cooperate more willingly when they delivery and transparent intention. Authority also depends on emotional discipline. Individuals who react impulsively to criticism or conflict reveal vulnerability that weakens their position. Calm responses under pressure signal strength and self-control. This steadiness discourages unnecessary confrontation and invites respectful engagement. Emotional regulation does not mean suppressing feelings entirely, but choosing when and how to express them constructively. Reputation forms gradually through repeated patterns of behavior. Every action contributes to a narrative others build over time. Reliability, fairness, and competence create a foundation of respect that extends beyond immediate interactions. Once established, a strong reputation amplifies influence because people anticipate consistency. Conversely, careless actions erode credibility and require significant effort to repair. Strategic thinking strengthens the ability to shape outcomes. Rather than reacting to events as they arise, thoughtful individuals anticipate consequences and prepare responses in advance. They recognize patterns in human behavior and environmental shifts, allowing them to position themselves advantageously. Patience becomes a powerful asset, enabling long-term planning while others chase immediate gratification. Legacy grows from sustained contribution rather than momentary recognition. Short bursts of attention may create temporary fame, but meaningful impact requires durability. Individuals who invest in lasting systems, institutions, or ideas extend their influence beyond personal presence. Their work continues shaping lives even after direct involvement ends. This perspective encourages decisions guided by enduring value instead of quick applause. Responsibility expands alongside influence. The greater one's reach, the more consequences their actions carry. Ethical awareness becomes essential, not as moral decoration but as practical necessity. Harmful decisions eventually provoke resistance and damage stability. Sustainable influence therefore depends on balancing self-interest with broader impact. This balance protects both reputation and long-term effectiveness. Adaptability remains crucial in a constantly changing environment. Methods that succeed in one era may fail in another. Those who remain flexible in strategy while steady in principle navigate uncertainty more effectively. They learn continuously, refine their approach, and integrate new knowledge without abandoning core identity. This combination of consistency and evolution allows influence to remain relevant across shifting circumstances. True power ultimately rests on self-mastery. Individuals who understand their emotions, motivations, and limitations operate with deliberate intention rather than unconscious reaction. They recognize when to advance and when to withdraw, when to speak and when to remain silent. This internal governance creates stability that external chaos cannot easily disrupt. Over time, such mastery fosters a quiet confidence that reshapes how life is experienced. Challenges become tests of skill rather than threats to identity. Relationships evolve into conscious partnerships instead of emotional dependencies. Success becomes a byproduct of disciplined focus rather than desperate pursuit. Yet even as influence expands outward, an inward journey continues, one that confronts mortality, meaning, and the ultimate question of how a finite life can be lived with depth, intensity, and deliberate purpose. Every human life moves toward the same unavoidable horizon, yet most people spend surprisingly little time confronting that reality directly. Mortality is often treated as an uncomfortable topic, pushed aside by distractions and routines. But when the awareness of life's finite nature is faced honestly, perception begins to change. Time no longer feels endless or abstract. Moments gain weight, choices gain urgency, and attention becomes more deliberate. Rather than drifting through habits shaped by others, individuals start evaluating whether their daily actions truly reflect personal priorities. A finite life naturally increases the value of lived experience. Simple pleasures become more vivid when recognized as temporary. Conversations carry deeper meaning when understood as limited opportunities for connection. Achievements feel more satisfying because they represent tangible expressions of effort within a restricted span of time. This awareness does not need to produce fear. Instead, it can create clarity. By accepting that existence has boundaries, individuals often feel motivated to live more intentionally. Meaning, in this perspective, is not something granted by distant forces but constructed through direct engagement with reality. Purpose rather than inherited doctrine. This freedom allows meaning to evolve as understanding deepens. Early ambitions may give way to more refined pursuits, shaped by maturity and reflection. Regret often stems from unexpressed potential and delayed action. People postpone aspirations, waiting for ideal circumstances that rarely arrive. Over time, hesitation accumulates into missed opportunities. Recognizing life's brevity encourages decisive movement. While careful planning remains important, excessive delay can quietly erode possibility. Taking thoughtful risks becomes preferable to endless preparation that never leads to execution. Courage grows when fear of judgment loses dominance. Many limitations arise not from lack of ability but from anxiety about social perception. When viewed against the backdrop of mortality, external opinions lose some of their power. The question shifts from, "How will this appear?" to, "Does this truly matter to me?" This internal reorientation strengthens authenticity and reduces the burden of constant performance. Personal fulfillment also depends on embracing the full spectrum of emotion. Joy gains depth when contrasted with struggle, and resilience forms through overcoming difficulty. Attempting to eliminate discomfort entirely can lead to emotional numbness. A richer approach accepts both pleasure and pain as integral aspects of existence. Challenges become opportunities to test strength, refine judgment, and develop empathy. Relationships acquire sharper significance within a limited lifespan. Superficial interactions gradually feel less satisfying than genuine connection. Investing time and attention in meaningful bonds produces memories and support systems that enrich experience. Honest communication strengthens trust, while unresolved conflict becomes more difficult to justify. The awareness of impermanence encourages forgiveness where possible and firm boundaries where necessary. Creativity offers another path toward lasting fulfillment. Building something that did not previously exist, whether art, ideas, businesses, or communities, provides a sense of participation in life's ongoing evolution. Creative effort transforms internal vision into external reality, leaving tangible evidence of one's presence. Even small acts of creation contribute to a broader sense of purpose. Acceptance of mortality also reshapes attitudes toward control. Not everything can be predicted or managed, and resisting this truth often creates unnecessary stress. Focusing energy on controllable factors while adapting to uncertainty produces steadier progress. Flexibility becomes more valuable than rigid expectation, allowing individuals to respond intelligently to changing conditions. Gratitude develops naturally when existence is viewed as temporary rather than guaranteed. Ordinary experiences, a calm morning, a shared laugh, a moment of quiet satisfaction, gain significance when recognized as fleeting. This appreciation does not require grand achievements, it arises from attentive presence. Living fully becomes less about constant intensity and more about conscious participation. Ultimately, a finite life invites deliberate design. Each person shapes their path through accumulated decisions, guided by awareness of consequence and desire. Instead of waiting for external direction, individuals become active authors of their experience. The goal is not perfection but completeness, a life lived with engagement, honesty, and thoughtful intention. And in accepting both human instinct and human limitation, a final understanding emerges. Power, pleasure, ambition, connection, and meaning are not separate pursuits but intertwined dimensions of a fully realized existence. There comes a point when personal philosophy is no longer just an intellectual framework but a lived orientation toward reality. Ideas that once felt provocative or unconventional gradually become practical tools for navigating everyday situations. Decisions grow clearer because they are filtered through self-knowledge rather than social pressure. Emotional reactions become easier to interpret, ambitions easier to organize, and relationships easier to evaluate. What once seemed like rebellion transforms into alignment, a state where actions reflect inner truth instead of external expectation. Living with this alignment requires continuous self-observation. Human beings are layered, often driven by motives they do not immediately recognize. Pride can disguise insecurity, generosity can conceal a need for approval, and anger can mask disappointment. Honest introspection reveals these subtleties without self-condemnation. Instead of labeling certain feelings as unacceptable, they are examined as signals pointing toward unmet needs or unresolved efficiency. Pretending to be someone else demands constant monitoring of speech, posture, and behavior. Over time, this performance drains energy and creates quiet stress. When individuals accept their preferences, temperament, and worldview without apology, mental strain decreases. Communication grows more direct because there is less fear of exposure. Confidence emerges naturally, not as arrogance, but as comfort with one's own identity. This comfort also changes how conflict is handled. Disagreements no longer feel like threats to personal worth. Instead, they are recognized as natural collisions between differing interests, perspectives, or boundaries. Calm assertion replaces emotional escalation. A person who understands their priorities can negotiate firmly without unnecessary hostility. When compromise aligns with long-term goals, it is accepted willingly. When it does not, refusal becomes clear and composed rather than reactive. Boundaries become easier to maintain in all areas of life. Time, energy, and attention are treated as valuable resources rather than endlessly available supplies. Individuals grow more selective about commitments, recognizing that every agreement carries an opportunity cost. This selectivity is not selfishness but strategic preservation of focus. By protecting personal resources, one can invest more deeply in pursuits that truly matter. Pleasure, too, becomes more refined through awareness. Instead of chasing stimulation impulsively, individuals learn which experiences provide genuine satisfaction and which merely distract from deeper needs. This discernment prevents cycles of temporary gratification followed by emptiness. Enjoyment becomes intentional and immersive, appreciated without guilt yet balanced with responsibility. Life feels richer when pleasures are chosen consciously rather than consumed compulsively. Personal standards evolve as experience accumulates. Early goals driven by ego or imitation gradually give way to more meaningful aspirations. Individuals begin valuing depth over display, substance over recognition. Success is measured less by comparison with others and more by alignment with personal vision. This shift reduces envy and strengthens internal motivation, creating steadier progress. Independence deepens alongside this maturity. While cooperation remains valuable, reliance on constant approval diminishes. Decisions are guided by internal criteria shaped through reflection and lived evidence. Mistakes are acknowledged without dramatic self-blame, seen as part of refinement rather than proof of inadequacy. This resilience allows experimentation and calculated risk, both essential for growth. Social awareness also becomes sharper. Understanding human nature reveals patterns in behavior that once seemed confusing. People act from self-interest, emotional need, fear, or aspiration more often than from declared principles. Recognizing these drivers allows for more effective communication and realistic expectations. Disappointment decreases because idealized assumptions are replaced with practical understanding. At the same time, empathy grows more grounded. Accepting one's own complexity makes it easier to recognize complexity in others. Compassion becomes a conscious choice rather than a moral obligation, offered where it can create genuine improvement. This selective kindness prevents emotional exhaustion while preserving meaningful connection. Inner stability strengthens as external chaos loses its power to disrupt perspective. Uncertainty remains part of existence, yet it no longer provokes constant anxiety. Attention shifts from uncontrollable outcomes to controllable responses. This focus cultivates calm adaptability, allowing individuals to move through change without losing direction. Gradually, life feels less like a moral trial and more like an arena for deliberate experience. Each day presents opportunities to apply judgment, express identity, and pursue chosen aims. There is less need for external validation because fulfillment arises from coherent living. The individual stands neither in rebellion nor submission, but in ownership of their path. And from this ownership emerges a quiet realization that philosophy reaches its highest form not in dramatic declarations, but in the steady, confident rhythm of a life directed from within. A fully self-directed life eventually leads to a different relationship with responsibility. When a person no longer attributes outcomes to fate, divine will, or social permission, every choice gains sharper significance. Success feels earned because it arises from deliberate effort, and failure becomes instructive rather than humiliating. This shift removes the comfort of excuses, yet it replaces them with some effect. Small decisions reveal long shadows, influencing circumstances far beyond their moment of origin. Habits, especially, become visible as quiet architects of destiny. Daily routines either strengthen discipline or reinforce weakness, sharpen focus or scatter attention. Over time, the accumulation of minor choices constructs the framework within which larger opportunities either flourish or collapse. Recognizing this pattern encourages mindfulness in ordinary actions, transforming mundane moments into meaningful investments in one's future condition. Self-discipline grows not from fear of punishment but from respect for personal goals. When individuals understand what they truly want, restraint feels less like deprivation and more like strategic alignment. Impulses are evaluated rather than obeyed automatically. This does not eliminate spontaneity, rather, it ensures that spontaneity serves enjoyment without sabotaging long-term direction. Balance forms between present pleasure and future stability, allowing both to coexist without constant conflict. This internal order strengthens resilience against external pressure. Social trends, emotional manipulation, and group expectations lose persuasive force when measured against clearly defined personal priorities. Individuals become less reactive to collective moods and more anchored in independent judgment. They observe without immediately absorbing, listen without automatically agreeing, and decide without compulsive conformity. This steadiness creates psychological space where thoughtful responses replace emotional reflexes. Over time, such independence reduces the need for constant validation. Approval from others becomes pleasant but not essential. Self-worth rests on lived integrity rather than applause. This inner stability allows individuals to pursue unconventional paths without excessive anxiety. Creativity expands when fear of criticism diminishes, and original ideas emerge more freely when conformity no longer feels necessary for belonging. Freedom of thought also encourages intellectual honesty. Rather than defending beliefs out of loyalty or habit, individuals remain willing to revise perspectives when evidence changes. Admitting error becomes a sign of maturity rather than weakness. This flexibility prevents stagnation and supports continuous learning. The mind stays active, curious, and adaptable instead of rigidly protecting outdated assumptions. As personal clarity deepens, relationships evolve naturally. Superficial connections based on convenience or image gradually lose appeal. Individuals seek interactions that stimulate growth, mutual respect, and shared purpose. Communication becomes more direct because there is less fear of disagreement. Differences in opinion are handled with composure rather than defensiveness, allowing dialogue without hostility. This openness fosters stronger bonds grounded in authenticity rather than performance. Emotional maturity further refines how energy is invested. Not every conflict deserves engagement, and not every opinion requires response. Individuals learn to distinguish between situations that warrant attention and those that merely drain focus. This discernment conserves mental resources for meaningful pursuits. Silence becomes as intentional as speech, and patience replaces the urge for constant reaction. Perspective also shifts regarding external chaos. Political turbulence, social division, and cultural shifts are recognized as recurring features of collective human behavior rather than unprecedented crises. This broader view reduces panic and encourages strategic awareness. Instead of becoming overwhelmed by events beyond control, individuals concentrate on areas where influence remains possible. Calm observation replaces emotional entanglement. Gratification becomes more nuanced as well. Achievements provide satisfaction not only for their external rewards but for the internal growth they represent. Progress signals evolving capability, reinforcing confidence in one's capacity to shape circumstances. Even setbacks contribute to development by revealing weaknesses that can be corrected. This reframing transforms obstacles into training grounds rather than deterrents. Over years of conscious living, identity solidifies into something steady yet flexible, rooted in core principles while open to refinement. The individual no longer drifts between borrowed roles but operates from a coherent center. This coherence produces a quiet presence that influences environments without force. Others sense reliability, clarity, and intention, often responding with respect. Life, viewed through this lens, becomes neither a moral battlefield nor a passive journey but an active craft. Experiences are deliberate engagement. A final layer of understanding begins to take form, the recognition that mastering oneself is an ongoing process, one that deepens as awareness expands and continues refining the art of living with conscious strength. Mastery of self is not a finish line that one suddenly crosses, but a continuous refinement that deepens with awareness and experience. The more a person observes their own patterns, reactions, and motivations, the more clearly they see that growth is not about transforming into someone else, but about removing internal friction. Much of human struggle comes from conflict between desire and fear, intention and habit, honesty and image. When these internal divisions shrink, energy flows more smoothly into action, and life begins to feel less forced and more deliberate. This refinement begins with attention. Most people move through their days on mental autopilot, reacting to situations through ingrained habits formed years earlier. These patterns often operate below conscious awareness, shaping tone of voice, posture, emotional responses, and decision-making speed. By slowing down perception and observing these tendencies without immediate judgment, individuals gain the power to adjust them. Awareness creates choice, and choice creates the possibility of change. Emotional regulation becomes more sophisticated through this process. Feelings are no longer treated as commands that must be obeyed instantly. Instead, they are recognized as signals providing information about internal and external conditions. Anger may reveal violated boundaries. Anxiety may signal uncertainty or lack of preparation. Excitement may indicate alignment with genuine desire. By interpreting emotions rather than being controlled by them, individuals maintain composure while still honoring their inner experience. Patience strengthens as the need for immediate resolution weakens. Many poor decisions arise from discomfort with uncertainty. The urge to escape tension can push people toward impulsive words or actions that create larger problems later. Learning to sit with temporary discomfort allows clearer evaluation of options. Time becomes an ally rather than an enemy. Deliberate pacing often reveals solutions that hurried reactions would have missed. Self-trust grows naturally from repeated evidence of competent judgment. Each time a person handles difficulty with composure, sets a boundary successfully, or follows through on a commitment, confidence deepens. This confidence is quieter and more stable than surface-level bravado because it rests on lived proof rather than external praise. Over time, individuals rely less on reassurance from others and more on their own evaluation of circumstances. As inner stability develops, comparison with others loses its emotional intensity. Envy fades when personal direction becomes clear. Every individual operates with different abilities, limitations, and aspirations, making constant comparison both misleading and psychologically draining. Focusing on personal progress encourages realistic standards and sustainable motivation. Achievement becomes a private measure of alignment with one's own vision rather than a public contest for validation. Mental clarity also improves decision-making. When distractions from insecurity, guilt, and social pressure diminish, priorities stand out more sharply. Individuals learn to distinguish between what is urgent and what is important, between temporary excitement and lasting value. This discernment reduces wasted effort and increases the effectiveness of action. Energy is invested where it produces meaningful return rather than scattered across trivial pursuits. Integrity becomes a guiding principle, not as moral decoration but as functional necessity. Acting against one's own standards creates internal tension that erodes confidence and focus. Consistency between belief and behavior, on the other hand, strengthens psychological cohesion. Individuals who live in alignment with their principles experience less inner conflict and greater decisiveness. Their actions carry more weight because they arise from stable conviction rather than shifting convenience. Resilience matures beyond simple endurance. Instead of merely surviving difficulty, individuals learn to extract insight from it. Failures are examined for strategic lessons, misunderstandings for communication improvements, and setbacks for hidden opportunities. This adaptive mindset transforms adversity into training. Hardship becomes an instructor refining judgment, patience, and emotional strength. A deeper sense of autonomy emerges as dependence on external structures decreases. While society remains an essential environment for cooperation and exchange, individuals no longer look to isolation and blind conformity. Gratitude evolves into quiet appreciation for the ability to shape one's path. Instead of wishing for different circumstances, individuals work intelligently with available conditions. Limitations are acknowledged without dramatization, and strengths are utilized without arrogance. This realistic optimism fosters steady progress without denial of difficulty. Over time, life takes on a rhythm shaped by conscious intention. Periods of effort alternate with restoration, ambition balances with enjoyment, and solitude complements connection. This rhythm feels sustainable because it respects both human limitation and potential. The pursuit of growth no longer feels frantic but purposeful. And as awareness continues expanding, a subtle realization emerges that self-mastery is not about controlling every outcome, but about meeting each moment with clarity, steadiness, and deliberate presence, a way of living that quietly transforms ordinary existence into a consciously directed journey. There is a quiet strength that emerges when a person fully accepts the nature of existence without needing comforting illusions. Life reveals itself as neither inherently fair nor intentionally cruel, but simply governed by cause and effect within a complex web of human behavior and natural forces. Resisting this reality often creates frustration, while accepting it allows clearer perception. When expectations align with how the world actually operates, disappointment becomes less paralyzing and adaptation becomes easier. Energy once spent wishing for different rules can instead be directed toward strategic action. Clarity about reality encourages practical thinking. Outcomes are influenced by preparation, timing, environment, and the choices of others, not merely by intention or hope. Recognizing this leads to a mindset focused on probability rather than fantasy. Individuals begin assessing risks more accurately, weighing potential benefits against consequences, and adjusting plans as circumstances evolve. This approach does not eliminate uncertainty, but it reduces unnecessary surprise. Prepared minds respond more effectively than those guided by assumption. Personal responsibility deepens within this framework. Blame becomes less attractive because it offers no constructive path forward. While external factors undeniably shape opportunities and limitations, individuals retain control over their responses. This control includes attitude, effort, strategy, and persistence. Accepting responsibility does not mean self-criticism for every setback. Rather, it means asking what can be learned and improved moving ahead. Such reflection transforms difficulty into a source of refinement. Confidence grows from repeated engagement with reality rather than retreat into avoidance. Facing challenges directly, even when outcomes are uncertain, builds familiarity with discomfort. Over time, situations that once felt intimidating become manageable through experience. This gradual expansion of capability strengthens composure under pressure. Instead of being overwhelmed by complexity, individuals learn to break problems into workable parts and address them systematically. Self-reliance becomes balanced with intelligent cooperation. Independence does not require isolation. Others possess knowledge, skills, and perspectives that can complement one's own. Strategic collaboration multiplies effectiveness when built on mutual benefit and respect. At the same time, maintaining self-sufficiency prevents overdependence that weakens resilience. This balance allows individuals to stand firmly on their own while engaging productively with broader networks. Adaptability proves essential in a world of constant change. Economic shifts, technological advances, and cultural transformations continually reshape opportunity landscapes. Rigid attachment to outdated methods creates vulnerability, while flexible thinking preserves relevance. Individuals who remain open to learning new skills and adjusting strategies navigate transitions more smoothly. Adaptation becomes a continuous process rather than a reluctant reaction. Perception of success also matures. Instead of chasing dramatic milestones alone, individuals begin appreciating incremental progress. Small improvements accumulate into meaningful advancement when sustained over time. This perspective reduces impatience and encourages consistent effort. The journey itself becomes as valuable as its outcomes because growth occurs throughout the process, not solely at visible endpoints. Inner peace gradually detaches from external turbulence. Circumstances fluctuate, yet emotional stability remains anchored in perspective and preparation. Individuals learn to distinguish between event disruption. A refined sense of purpose develops alongside this stability. Goals are chosen carefully, reflecting both personal values and realistic assessment of capability. Pursuits that once seemed urgent may lose significance, replaced by endeavors offering deeper fulfillment. Purpose becomes less about proving worth to others and more about expressing one's nature through meaningful activity. Gratification shifts from momentary intensity toward sustained satisfaction. Instead of seeking constant stimulation, individuals appreciate steady progress, meaningful relationships, and periods of quiet reflection. This balanced approach prevents burnout and fosters long-term well-being. Life feels less like a race for attention and more like a deliberate cultivation of experience. Wisdom grows from accumulated observation of both success and failure. Patterns become easier to recognize, enabling more accurate prediction of consequences. This foresight sharpens judgment and reduces impulsive decisions. Mistakes remain inevitable, yet their frequency and severity diminish as understanding deepens. Humility naturally accompanies genuine competence. Awareness of complexity prevents overconfidence, while recognition of personal growth encourages continued learning. This combination creates openness without insecurity and confidence without arrogance. Individuals remain grounded even as their capabilities expand. In time, existence feels less like a puzzle demanding perfect answers and more like a landscape inviting skillful navigation. Each decision shapes direction, each response influences momentum, and each moment offers a choice between awareness and autopilot. Living consciously becomes an ongoing practice rather than a distant ideal. And through this steady practice, a final understanding quietly settles in. Fulfillment is not discovered in extremes of denial or excess, but in the disciplined freedom of a mind that sees clearly, chooses deliberately, and engages fully with the reality of being alive. At a certain stage of personal growth, the search for dramatic transformation begins to fade, replaced by a quieter appreciation for steady refinement. People often imagine change as a sudden breakthrough, a moment where everything becomes clear and effortless. In reality, meaningful development tends to unfold gradually, shaped by small adjustments repeated consistently over time. This slower process may appear less exciting, but it creates deeper and more stable foundations. Instead of chasing intense peaks of motivation, individuals learn to value sustainable rhythms of effort and recovery. Daily life becomes the training ground for this refinement. Ordinary situations provide constant opportunities to practice awareness, patience, and deliberate choice. A conversation becomes a chance to improve listening. A disagreement becomes a test of emotional control. A setback becomes an exercise in adaptability. Growth no longer depends on extraordinary circumstances because each moment contains lessons for those paying attention. This mindset transforms routine experiences into meaningful practice rather than passive repetition. Attention becomes one of the most valuable personal resources. Modern environments compete aggressively for mental focus, scattering thought across endless streams of stimulation. When attention is constantly fragmented, clarity weakens and decisions become reactive. Learning to direct focus intentionally strengthens perception and productivity. Individuals become more selective about what deserves their mental energy, protecting their minds from unnecessary noise. This discipline improves both efficiency and emotional balance. Self-awareness deepens through reflection. Taking time to review actions, reactions, and outcomes reveals patterns that might otherwise remain invisible. Individuals begin recognizing recurring triggers, strengths that can be leveraged, and habits that quietly undermine progress. Reflection is not self-criticism but calibration, a way of adjusting direction based on lived evidence. This practice prevents stagnation and keeps development aligned with evolving priorities. Emotional balance benefits from accepting that moods naturally fluctuate. Expecting constant positivity creates frustration when inevitable low periods arise. Instead, individuals learn to navigate emotional cycles with patience. Difficult days are approached with gentler expectations, while productive periods are used fully without overextension. This flexible approach reduces internal conflict and supports long-term consistency. Motivation also becomes more reliable when tied to purpose rather than impulse. Short bursts of inspiration often fade quickly, leaving unfinished efforts behind. Purpose-driven action, how feelings and more unchosen intention. As discipline matures, freedom expands in unexpected ways. Structure is often misunderstood as restriction, yet thoughtful routines reduce chaos and decision fatigue. When essential habits become automatic, mental energy is preserved for creative and strategic thinking. This balance between structure and flexibility allows individuals to remain productive without feeling trapped by rigid systems. Relationships continue evolving alongside personal maturity. Communication grows clearer as individuals express needs and boundaries directly rather than expecting others to guess. Misunderstandings decrease because assumptions are replaced with dialogue. Emotional independence reduces clinginess and possessiveness, allowing connections to form through mutual respect rather than insecurity. Time spent with others becomes more meaningful because it is chosen deliberately, not driven by fear of loneliness. Perspective expands as experiences accumulate. Situations that once felt overwhelming are seen within broader context, reducing emotional intensity. Individuals recognize that most problems are temporary and manageable with thoughtful response. This wider viewpoint fosters patience and prevents exaggerated reactions to short-term difficulties. Challenges are evaluated realistically rather than catastrophized. Gratitude becomes quieter and more constant. Instead of appearing only during major achievements, appreciation settles into daily awareness. Small comforts, simple pleasures, and moments of calm are noticed more easily. This steady gratitude strengthens emotional resilience, providing balance during periods of stress or uncertainty. Confidence transforms into a calm assurance rather than a need for display. There is less desire to prove worth through argument or comparison. Abilities speak through results, and limitations are acknowledged without embarrassment. This grounded self-perception allows individuals to engage authentically without defensive behavior. Over time, inner and outer life grow more aligned. Goals reflect genuine values, actions support long-term vision, and distractions lose persuasive power. This alignment reduces internal tension and increases satisfaction with progress. Life feels less scattered because effort flows in coherent direction. The journey of refinement continues without dramatic announcements. Growth becomes visible through subtle improvements in judgment, communication, and emotional steadiness. Others may notice a quiet reliability, a composed presence that influences environments gently but consistently. And as this steady evolution unfolds, a deeper sense of harmony begins to take shape. The realization that a well-lived life is not built on intensity alone, but on the patient integration of awareness, discipline, connection, and purposeful action woven thoughtfully into each passing day. Over time, a person who lives with awareness begins to notice a subtle but powerful shift in how effort feels. Struggle does not disappear, but it becomes cleaner, free from unnecessary inner resistance. Energy is no longer wasted fighting one's own nature or chasing expectations that never truly resonated. Instead, effort flows toward aims that feel internally consistent, and this alignment creates a sense of quiet momentum. Work remains demanding, yet it carries less emotional friction because it arises from deliberate choice rather than obligation or imitation. This shift changes the experience of discipline. What once felt like forced restraint gradually transforms into self-respect in action. Saying no to distractions becomes easier when attention is valued as a finite resource. Maintaining healthy routines feels less like punishment and more like preparation for stronger performance. Individuals stop negotiating endlessly with themselves because priorities have been clarified through reflection and experience. Consistency becomes an expression of identity rather than a temporary strategy. Clarity of intention also sharpens decision-making. When opportunities appear, they are evaluated against personal direction instead of social trends or fear of missing out. This reduces impulsive commitments that drain time and energy. Choices become cleaner, guided by alignment rather than urgency. Even difficult decisions feel steadier because they emerge from thoughtful consideration rather than emotional pressure. Patience deepens as individuals recognize that meaningful outcomes often require sustained investment. Modern culture encourages immediate results, but lasting progress usually develops through gradual accumulation. Skills strengthen through repetition, trust builds through consistent behavior, and influence expands through long-term credibility. Balanced as extremes of pride and insecurity lose intensity. Success is appreciated without exaggeration, and failure is examined without harsh self-judgment. This emotional moderation allows learning to occur without defensive reactions. People become more willing to acknowledge mistakes because errors are seen as information rather than identity. This mindset accelerates improvement and strengthens resilience. Inner dialogue becomes calmer and more constructive. Instead of constant self-criticism or unrealistic optimism, thoughts take on a practical and supportive tone. Individuals learn to encourage themselves with realism, recognizing effort while identifying areas for refinement. This internal partnership strengthens confidence and reduces anxiety driven by perfectionism. Awareness of limits becomes a form of intelligence rather than weakness. Everyone operates within boundaries shaped by energy, time, and capability. Respecting these limits prevents burnout and encourages strategic allocation of effort. Individuals learn when to push forward and when to rest deliberately. Recovery becomes part of progress rather than a sign of laziness. Connection with others also grows more intentional. Individuals become more attentive listeners, recognizing that understanding often matters more than immediate response. Conversations feel less like competitions and more like exchanges of perspective. Respect deepens when differences are explored thoughtfully rather than resisted defensively. Relationships stabilize because communication rests on clarity rather than assumption. Moments of solitude gain new value as opportunities for recalibration. Quiet reflection allows experiences to settle into insight. Individuals review recent actions, adjust priorities, and reconnect with long-term direction. Solitude stops feeling like isolation and begins serving as maintenance for mental clarity. This balance between engagement and reflection supports steady psychological health. Material pursuits are viewed with greater realism. Comfort and financial stability are appreciated as tools that support independence and opportunity, but they no longer define identity. Possessions become functional rather than symbolic measures of worth. This perspective reduces unnecessary comparison and promotes financial decisions aligned with genuine needs and aspirations. Emotional experiences grow richer through mindful presence. Joy is felt more fully when attention is not divided, and challenges feel more manageable when approached calmly. Individuals develop the capacity to remain present without constantly escaping into distraction. This presence strengthens memory, appreciation, and the sense of truly participating in one's own life. Gradually, personal values solidify into guiding principles that require little external reinforcement. Integrity becomes natural because actions reflect internal standards. There is less temptation to compromise core beliefs for temporary approval. This steadiness builds trust both internally and externally, reinforcing a sense of grounded identity. Life begins to feel cohesive rather than fragmented. Work, relationships, rest, and ambition integrate into a balanced rhythm shaped by conscious priorities. Individuals no longer feel pulled in conflicting directions because choices align with defined purpose. This coherence reduces stress and increases satisfaction with progress. And within this cohesion emerges a quiet realization that fulfillment is not a distant reward waiting at the end of effort, but a byproduct of living each day with deliberate awareness, steady discipline, and a sincere connection to what truly matters. There is a calm confidence that develops when a person stops searching for a final destination in life and instead learns to value the process of living itself. The constant pressure to arrive somewhere, to reach a perfect level of success, happiness, or recognition, slowly dissolves. In its place grows an appreciation for steady movement, thoughtful effort, and the quiet satisfaction of meaningful engagement. Life begins to feel less like a race with a finish line and more like an ongoing craft shaped by attention and intention. This perspective reduces the anxiety that often accompanies comparison. When progress is viewed as personal rather than competitive, the achievements of others no longer threaten self-worth. Each individual walks a path influenced by different abilities, experiences, and aspirations. Measuring one life against another becomes less relevant than evaluating whether one's own direction feels honest and constructive. Envy gradually gives way to curiosity and respect, freeing emotional energy for more productive pursuits. A deeper sense of presence emerges as attention previously overlooked, the tone of a conversation, the atmosphere of a familiar place, the subtle satisfaction of completing a simple task well. This heightened awareness enriches daily life, transforming routine into participation rather than passive motion. Acceptance plays a key role in this transformation. Certain realities cannot be changed: the passage of time, the unpredictability of events, the limitations inherent in human ability. Resisting these truths often produces frustration and wasted energy. Accepting them, however, encourages wiser allocation of effort. Individuals learn to distinguish between what can be influenced and what must simply be navigated. This clarity fosters emotional balance and strategic action. Letting go of unnecessary control strengthens adaptability. Attempts to manage every outcome create tension and disappointment when circumstances inevitably shift. By focusing on preparation and flexible response rather than rigid expectation, individuals remain steady amid uncertainty. This adaptability does not imply passivity, rather, it reflects readiness to adjust course intelligently as new information appears. Self-worth becomes increasingly independent of external validation. Praise and recognition are appreciated but no longer required for motivation. Individuals gain satisfaction from internal alignment, knowing that actions reflect genuine priorities and considered judgment. This inward stability reduces vulnerability to criticism and protects against the emotional swings of public opinion. Gratitude deepens through recognition of life's impermanence. Experiences gain richness when understood as temporary. Even challenges carry value by contributing to growth and perspective. The awareness that nothing lasts indefinitely sharpens appreciation for what exists now. This perspective nurtures humility and wonder without drifting into sentimentality. Forgiveness also becomes easier, both toward oneself and others. People act imperfectly due to fear, misunderstanding, and limitation. Holding on to resentment prolongs emotional strain without improving the past. Releasing grudges creates space for clearer thinking and healthier interaction. Forgiveness does not require forgetting or excusing harmful behavior, it simply means choosing not to carry unnecessary emotional weight. Purpose grows quieter yet more stable. Instead of dramatic declarations, meaning arises through consistent engagement with chosen responsibilities and interests. Small contributions accumulate into a sense of usefulness and direction. Individuals discover that purpose is less about grand gestures and more about sustained sincerity in everyday actions. Simplicity gains appeal in both thought and lifestyle. Excessive complexity often distracts from what truly matters. By reducing unnecessary commitments, possessions, and mental clutter, individuals create room for focus and creativity. This simplicity does not imply minimal ambition but clearer prioritization. Energy flows more efficiently when distractions are limited. Moments of silence and reflection become sources of renewal rather than emptiness. Stepping back from constant stimulation allows insights to surface and emotional tension to settle. Individuals grow comfortable with their own company, strengthening independence and self-understanding. This inner stability enhances every external engagement. Compassion matures into practical understanding. Recognizing shared human vulnerability fosters patience without naivete. Kindness is offered thoughtfully, balancing empathy with healthy boundaries. This measured compassion strengthens relationships while protecting personal well-being. Gradually, existence feels more grounded and coherent. Decisions align with values, relationships reflect authenticity, and ambitions integrate with realistic expectations. Emotional turbulence decreases as perspective widens. Life unfolds as a continuous process of learning, adjusting, and participating with awareness. And in this steady participation, a final clarity begins to settle, the understanding that a meaningful life is not constructed from dramatic extremes, but from the consistent practice of living deliberately, responding wisely, and remaining fully present in the unfolding experience of being human. With time and sustained awareness, a person begins to sense a deeper harmony between intention and action. The inner conflicts that once created hesitation grow quieter, replaced by a steady sense of direction. Choices no longer feel like constant moral dilemmas or battles between impulse and obligation. Instead, decisions arise from a clearer understanding of priorities, limits, and desired outcomes. This clarity simplifies life, not by removing complexity from the world and emotional reactions to situations beyond control. As maturity develops, individuals become more selective with their attention. They invest energy where it can produce meaningful results and withdraw it from situations driven purely by drama or ego. This disciplined focus creates a sense of quiet efficiency. Tasks are approached with presence, conversations with intention, and rest with genuine relaxation rather than restless distraction. Emotional steadiness strengthens relationships in subtle but powerful ways. When reactions are no longer impulsive, communication becomes clearer and more respectful. People feel safer expressing themselves around someone who listens without immediate judgment or defensiveness. Trust grows not from grand promises but from consistent emotional reliability. Over time, this reliability forms the foundation for deeper connections built on mutual respect rather than emotional dependency. A refined sense of self also changes how criticism is received. Feedback is no longer interpreted as a personal attack but evaluated for useful insight. If criticism is constructive, it becomes a tool for improvement. If it is unfair, it loses much of its emotional sting because self-worth no longer depends entirely on external approval. This balanced response prevents unnecessary conflict and preserves mental clarity. Humility develops naturally alongside competence. As individuals gain experience, they recognize how much there is still to learn. This awareness prevents arrogance while encouraging continued curiosity. Confidence remains grounded because it is based on practical ability rather than inflated self-image. Others respond positively to this balance, sensing both capability and openness. Time itself begins to feel different. Instead of rushing constantly toward future goals, individuals learn to work steadily while still appreciating the present. Planning remains important, but it no longer overshadows daily experience. Each phase of effort is understood as part of a longer rhythm, with periods of action balanced by recovery and reflection. This rhythm prevents burnout and supports sustained motivation. Material ambitions become more intentional. Rather than pursuing possessions for status alone, individuals choose acquisitions that genuinely enhance comfort, productivity, or enjoyment. Financial decisions align more closely with long-term stability than short-term display. This practical approach reduces stress and fosters a sense of independence grounded in preparation rather than appearance. As perspective broadens, tolerance for uncertainty increases. Life's unpredictability is no longer viewed as a threat but as a natural condition requiring adaptability. Plans are made with flexibility, and unexpected changes are met with problem-solving rather than panic. This calm responsiveness allows individuals to navigate challenges with composure, often finding opportunities hidden within disruption. Personal identity grows more integrated. There is less separation between public persona and private self, reducing the strain of maintaining appearances. Individuals speak more honestly, act more consistently, and feel less pressure to perform for approval. This authenticity creates a sense of ease that influences every area of life, from professional environments to intimate relationships. Gratitude becomes less dramatic but more constant. Instead of appearing only during major milestones, appreciation quietly accompanies everyday experiences. A productive morning, a meaningful conversation, or a moment of rest carries genuine value. This steady gratitude enhances emotional resilience and reduces the tendency to take ordinary stability for granted. Curiosity continues guiding intellectual growth. Individuals remain open to new ideas without feeling compelled to adopt every trend. They evaluate information thoughtfully, integrating what proves useful and discarding what does not. This selective openness strengthens judgment while preventing rigidity. Even ambition takes on a calmer form. The desire to achieve remains strong, but it is no longer fueled by insecurity or comparison. Goals are pursued because they align with personal vision, not because they promise validation. Progress feels satisfying in itself, independent of applause. Life gradually feels less fragmented and more cohesive. Effort, rest, relationships, and solitude each serve a clear purpose within a balanced system shaped by conscious priorities. Emotional extremes soften, replaced by steady engagement with reality. And within this steady engagement arises a quiet contentment, not the fleeting pleasure of momentary success, but the deeper satisfaction of knowing that one's way of living reflects deliberate thought, grounded value. Feels lighter, even when responsibilities remain substantial. Challenges still arise, obligations still demand effort, and uncertainty never disappears, yet the inner resistance that once magnified these pressures has diminished. The mind no longer fights reality at every turn. Instead, it works with circumstances, adjusting, learning, and moving forward with quiet steadiness. This shift does not make life effortless, but it makes effort more efficient and far less draining. A sense of proportion becomes one of the most valuable internal tools. Problems are viewed within wider context rather than through the narrow lens of immediate discomfort. Minor inconveniences are handled without dramatization, while serious matters receive thoughtful attention without panic. This balanced perspective prevents emotional overreaction and conserves mental energy for situations that truly matter. The ability to distinguish between what is urgent and what is merely loud creates a calmer, more deliberate pace of living. Expectations grow more realistic as experience accumulates. People stop demanding perfection from themselves, from others, and from circumstances. They understand that mistakes, delays, and misunderstandings are natural parts of complex systems involving human behavior. This acceptance reduces frustration and makes cooperation easier. Instead of being constantly disappointed by reality's imperfections, individuals learn to work constructively within them. Patience deepens into quiet endurance. Many worthwhile goals require sustained effort with little immediate reward. Earlier in life, this slow progress might have felt discouraging. With maturity, however, individuals recognize that meaningful achievements often grow invisibly before becoming visible. This understanding supports persistence during periods when results seem distant. Effort continues not because success is guaranteed on a specific timeline, but because the direction itself feels worthwhile. Emotional independence becomes more stable and natural. The opinions of others still matter, but they no longer dominate decision-making. Approval is appreciated without becoming necessary for self-worth. criticism is considered without automatically triggering defensiveness. This balanced stance allows individuals to interact openly while maintaining internal stability. There is also a growing comfort with solitude. Time spent alone is no longer seen as emptiness to be filled, but as space for reflection and renewal. In quiet moments, thoughts settle and priorities become clearer. Solitude provides relief from constant external input, allowing the mind to recalibrate. This capacity to be at ease alone strengthens independence and improves the quality of social interactions. A practical form of optimism develops, grounded not in fantasy but in adaptability. Individuals trust their ability to respond effectively to changing conditions, even when outcomes remain uncertain. This confidence reduces fear of the unknown and encourages thoughtful risk-taking. Optimism becomes less about expecting easy paths and more about believing in one's capacity to navigate difficult ones. Personal values solidify into dependable guides. Decisions are made with less hesitation because priorities are clearly understood. Individuals no longer chase every appealing opportunity, recognizing that time and energy are limited. Saying no becomes easier when commitments are evaluated against deeper purpose. This selectivity strengthens focus and prevents overextension. Relationships benefit from this steadiness. Interactions become more genuine because there is less need for performance or approval seeking. People feel respected when communication is direct and honest. Boundaries are expressed calmly, preventing resentment from building silently. Mutual understanding deepens as emotional reactions become more measured and intentional. Gratitude continues to expand quietly. Life's simple consistencies, health, shelter, meaningful work, supportive connections, are appreciated without needing constant excitement. This steady appreciation provides emotional grounding during challenging periods. Instead of feeling entitled to ideal conditions, individuals recognize the value of stability and opportunity. Ambition remains present but balanced. Goals are pursued with dedication while recognizing that achievement alone cannot guarantee fulfillment. Individuals take satisfaction not only in outcomes but in the quality of effort invested. Work becomes an expression of values and capability rather than a desperate search for identity. Resilience strengthens through accumulated experience with setbacks. Having navigated difficulties before, individuals trust their capacity to recover, and a subtle sense of freedom grows from releasing unnecessary mental burdens. Worry about uncontrollable events lessens, comparisons lose emotional intensity, and regrets are processed without endless rumination. Attention returns to present possibilities instead of imagined alternatives. Life begins to feel cohesive and manageable, shaped by deliberate choices rather than reactive habits. Effort aligns with intention, and rest is enjoyed without guilt. Emotional balance allows for both ambition and contentment to coexist without contradiction. And in this balanced state, a quiet realization settles in. Peace is not found by escaping responsibility or chasing constant pleasure, but by meeting life directly with clarity, steady effort, grounded expectations, and the confidence that one can navigate whatever unfolds with thoughtful presence.